How many times have you said, "Oh, I wish things were different. I just wish this would happen or that would happen or this wasn't a part of my life or that would go away"? Um, how many times have you said, "Well, I wish I were a little different. I wish I would grow a little bit. I wish I would be able to be more of the person that I am"? And perhaps that's more to the point. Um, we often wish, our wishes are all different, but there is a mechanism that is at work in our lives that keeps us from having those wishes come true. It's a fairy tale often because of this mechanism, and that mechanism is our thought. No, not our conscious awareness, not our um, conscious thought, but that mechanism is our subconscious thought. Every day we make decisions minute by minute, hour by hour, and 95% of those decisions are made not by our conscious mind, but by our subconscious mind. Subconscious mind makes decisions about our breathing, our digestion, the circulation of our blood, all of those things that we don't even think about, where they're below the level of our awareness. But that subconscious mind keeps on churning away, making those decisions again and again and again. And if we would change, if we would submit to the wonder of wonder, if we would reinvent ourselves in our lives, we have to deal with that subconscious that is churning away, thinking the same thoughts that it's been thinking for years and decades and even most of our life. So there's a term called homeostasis. Homeostasis means that things kind of stay the same. There's a balance and they stay the same, and unless there's some thing that precipitates it, things are always going to change. Well, that's the subconscious. Subconscious knows how things are to be, has been instructed from very early in our life how things are to be, and the subconscious does the thinking that makes us stay that way, or that allows us to stay that way. It's not entirely a negative thing. The subconscious can also be thought of as the gatekeeper of your comfort zone. It will keep you in your comfort zone unless something is done to really evict you from that place. What happens in the subconscious is below the level, for the most part, of your conscious awareness. You don't even think about that. You get up in the morning and you go to brush your teeth, and you don't say, well, let me squirt this toothpaste on the toothbrush, and okay, that's enough. Let me take it now and put it in my mouth, and I'll brush for 3 minutes. The right side first, the left, the up, the down. Subconscious mind does that, and you, when you're brushing your teeth, are thinking about something else with the conscious mind. So all that the subconscious does is below, for the most part, the level of your conscious awareness. It's just a realm of beliefs and behaviors. The subconscious has registered your beliefs, perhaps from early in your life. It has gotten involved in a pattern of behavior, and it keeps that going. Just keeps that going. The subconscious thinks that for us, and so beliefs and behaviors. It also registers what you think of yourself, and it continues to instruct you on how to act, to be in connection with, to be in concert with what you think of yourself. Of course, it works both on the body and the mind, and it in the mind, it tells old narratives again and again and again, unless those narratives are interrupted, and the interruption is not always easy. It's the charge person for habits. Habits are the domain of the subconscious, and they keep those habits going until a habit change can be effected. And the subconscious is resistant to change. Really doesn't want to change. It's had good instructions. It's going to stick with those instructions, and it's not going to go with change. Sometimes that's good, but sometimes when we have that wish, when we have that heart's desire, we need to go beyond the subconscious. And that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about a couple of things that will help us to make those changes. First of them is wonder. Let me go back a second because I wanted to just give a little clearer idea of that subconscious. We might say that animals, we talk about them making decisions instinctively, but we might say that they operate completely on a subconscious level. It's something that's in them, and it just keeps being perpetuated. You remember the Russian scientist Ivan Pavlov and Pavlov's bell. Well, it goes a little different than what I was taught, or what I remember of what I was taught. Pavlov really didn't seek to discover what he in the end did discover, but what he wanted to do was to know how much saliva was generated when a certain kind of food was put in front of an animal, studying the animal behavior on that. So he had a meat powder that he prepared, and he put a little tube, a little test tube, to collect the saliva inside the dog's mouth. That collected the saliva and measured how much saliva was generated when the food was put in front of the animal. What he discovered, however, was that the lab assistants and attendants that brought those foods made a little bit of noise as they were coming to give the dogs the food. And the dogs began to salivate when they heard the footsteps of the lab assistants before the food was ever within their smell or range or in front of them. And so it turned Pavlov's thinking another way, to saying that there are stimuli that make the animal in its instinctive behavior, after a period of time, takes repeated work, but after a period of time, that stimulus could be associated with not just the food there, but with the footsteps or the bell, as we have come to know about Pavlov's bell, and how the dog would be stimulated by salivating when the bell or the footsteps of the assistant was there. That's much like that subconscious that we speak about. There is a repeated kind of thing that gets kind of in the brain of the animal, or in our very thinking process, and it continues to stay there. It stays and stays and stays until there is an interruption of very significant stimulus to change that. So we owe Pavlov a debt in understanding that behavior in animals, but we realize also that it has an impact with regard to how we respond. So if in fact we have a behavior, or we have a pattern in our life that we don't like, it's probably there because it's being reinforced over and over again, like it was for Pavlov's dog. But we do have an opportunity as individuals, as a species that has a thinking mind and a choice-making capability, to change that. And that's what I want to talk about today. And that's why I want to talk about wonder and reinvention. So wonder is rapt attention to something that is mysterious or new to one's experience. So this is that desire that we want. suddenly we're focused, we're urged, we just are consumed with the idea that there's something new out there that 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 we might be able to experience, and so we're engaged in wonder. So I would like myself to be able to use that wonder to change the things in my life. I would like to be open to that wonder that will urge me to to be a part of that change of habit. So I like to think that there are three ways of doing that. First of all, there is the element of pause. So often we get so involved that even if something catches our attention very, very briefly, it's gone oh so quickly. And we don't take time to pause. This is very much in alignment with our unity thinking, in which the stillness, that time of pause, of just slowing things down, is helpful if we, in fact, want to be directive in our own lives. And then there's the idea of pondering. I don't know if you remember the story in the Christian scriptures about the birth of Jesus. And of course, that was in Bethlehem in the manger, and the shepherds came and all of those things, singing glory to God in the highest. Afterward, in that second chapter of Luke, there's a little verse that says, Mary treasured all these things and pondered them in her heart. I like to think that this prepared her for the opportunity to be the earthly mother of a son who was developing into a spiritual master, because she had pondered, she had paused, she had pondered, taken time to allow that possibility that was there, that had been transmitted to her, that bit of wonder that was part and parcel of the whole birth story of Jesus of Nazareth. She pondered that and allowed it. She was just with it for a period of time to be able to then in the future respond in a way that would be supportive of Jesus as he grew into that spiritual teacher that that we know and we find helpful to us as we follow in his steps. And then I think there's another element. So there was pause and ponder. I think there's also the element of persistence. I suspect that any real change is going to require that persistence. We talk about being able to hold our focus on something that we want. That persistence is a part of wonder. So we begin with the wonder, the awe of the idea or the desire. We ponder that, we let that, we stay with it, we sit with it, and then we persist with it in the long run. We continue to do that in ways perhaps by working with affirmations or with tools that will help us to incorporate that into our life. It's not an automatic thing. It's like having to have a continual stimulus to reset that thinking of the subconscious that we talked about earlier. So I think that's the beautiful thing about wonder, is that we also have control in the area of wonder. We are given the perhaps the subject or the topic of our wonder by divine urge, and then we have control as we bring that to being in our life. So that brings us to the other word I'm using today, and that word is reinvention. I'm looking at the time. I'm trying to remember not to go too long. Reinvention, interestingly enough, that we had 3 P's for wonder. I'm going to give you 3 P's for reinvention. They're pause, ponder, and persistence. The same 3 work. Now, reinvention is to make something as if it is being made for the very first time. We know there's nothing new under the sun, but we have the opportunity to reinvent things in our lives, particularly ourselves, by those same three processes that I suggested before, to pause. Sometimes we're so busy and we're so hell-bent on going wherever we're going or doing whatever we're doing that we don't take time to pause, to allow for the scene to be set for reinvention. And then we don't take time really to ponder, to look at what is true in our life now, what it is that we desire. Part of that pondering is taking our fingers off of the attachment that we may have had to something prior. Reinvention requires a loosening of our grip on what and how things have been. And then, of course, there's that persistence. I think persistence to me is building of belief, and that building of belief is something that happens over time. It's not immediate. So we build belief. We know some of the tools that we have, spiritual practice in whatever way, reading and spiritual input, affirmations that we do on a daily basis, and just training ourselves. And that's part of that persistence that goes with reinventing ourselves. So I'd like to suggest that we can both get engaged in wonder and participate in reinvention, particularly with all those things that are up for grabs in our lives. We have the capability of making choice to do that. So one of my favorite Unity authors and teachers is Eric Butterworth. And he talks about not setting things right, but seeing things rightly. What we've talked about in terms of the subconscious, in terms of our choice making, with regard to pondering, with regard to reinvention, are in fact, lost my track of thought, but I'm going to go on. Those things that we get involved in are part of our consciousness and a development of consciousness. Consciousness is thought, feeling, both subconscious thought and conscious thought. We can develop that. We can build the beliefs that are there. We have the ability to do that. And so we talk about consciousness raising and consciousness building. And I know that you all have some of the tools that do that. If you're like me, you don't put them to use quite as much as you might like to. I want to give you just a quick personal example of how that has worked for me, how I've been able to do a little reinvention. Happened in my life about 8 years ago. A situation in which I was, I had a relationship that was very dysfunctional, that was very destructive, but somehow it was also within my comfort zone in some ways. So changing that became a desire at first. I was able to take some time to be with it and to use a tool for me at that point, which came into my life, which is called the Harmony Mantra. Worked with John Strickland in bringing that and articulating that. So that Harmony Mantra was something that I used daily as I went to work. At that point, I had a 30-minute drive to work, and I would say the Harmony Mantra for months over a period of time in that persistent desire to make the change, to make a reinvention for me. It worked. It was primarily a forgiveness exercise, both self-forgiveness and forgiveness of that other person. It did work over a period of time. I would not have gone on to Unity training, Unity study, were that change not be able to make. So that desire to move from that destructive place to one in my life that I could really look forward to and move forward in was there. And all of those elements were there. Time for pause, to just stop and ponder things and ponder the possibilities, and then persistently, and in my case, using that harmony mantra to go ahead to affect that change in my life. So there you go, wonder and reinvention. Pause, then ponder, then persist, persist, persist. And so it is. Amen.
Thank you, Neal. Great message for today.